Welcome to episode 30 of Torah on the Go. Whether you are walking your dog, or you are working out on your Stairmaster, or you are at a celebration watch party of the season finale of season 1 of Torah on the Go, I want to welcome you here with Rabbi Feinstein.
Thank you.
I want to begin by offering a moment of gratitude. I'd like to thank Colin Plume, who has provided this recording space to us for the entire season, all of our episodes. It has meant a great deal to us that Colin has allowed us to pursue this idea of podcasting for our first season, and we'll forever be grateful to Colin for allowing us the space.
And the staff of his company, Noble Gold, have been very, very accommodating.
Very accommodating, very helpful. And we want to thank Ian and Adina and everybody from our staff who have played a major, major role in making this first season possible.
Ian makes us look good. He takes 20 pounds off. He has that lens.
He uses the handsome filter on all the cameras.
I so appreciate
That's right. That. All right. Well, this is the culmination of the season, talking about the first book of the Torah, the book of Genesis, Sefer Bereshit. And so we begin with the expanse of possibility, the creation of the world, and we end in a dark, confined coffin in Egypt. That's where we begin and we end, right? That's where the book begins and ends. And so I'm going to ask you, is the book of Genesis, when we look back at reading the entirety of the book, is Sefer Bereshit an optimistic book or is it a pessimistic book?
It's a very optimistic book. It is a book all about hope. It's all about hope. Look, we've talked about this over and again. It's so important. The book presents 6, 7 brother stories. Cain and Abel, the sons of Noah, Abraham and his brother's surrogate Lot, Isaac and Ishmael, Jacob and Esau, the brothers of Joseph. And in each generation, there is an attempt at fratricide. Cain and Abel fratricide is successful. In every other generation, the brothers are at each other.
I'm going to add that fratricide means brothers killing each other.
Brothers killing each other, because the Torah, unlike Sigmund Freud believed that your relationship with your parents was the determinant of character and the driver of human history, the Oedipal dramas, the driver of human history. The Bible believes that it's your relationship with siblings that shapes character, shapes human personality, and drives human history. And we begin, the very beginning, the very first-born brothers in the world are at each other's throats. But at the end, the brothers come together. At the end, there is a reconciliation. In the book of Psalms, there's the line that's become the most favorite campfire song in Jewish history, is Hine ma tovu manayim, Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. How wonderful and terribly rare it is that brothers, that siblings can come together and make peace, be whole, live together. And that's what happens at the end. I mean, so the whole thing is a story begging us to see our oneness with our brothers, our oneness with our siblings, begging us to make steps toward a unity, to see the human family as one. And at the end, that's how the book comes to an end. It gives us that image. Ironically, it's in Egypt. Ironically, it doesn't happen in Canaan, where the covenant was supposed to come to fruition. It happens in Egypt. But in Egypt, we become we become a people. And that's where the next chapter is going to take off from the Pesach story. But I think it's a terribly optimistic story.
So I think that actually it's a question of confusion, whether it's an optimistic book or a pessimistic book. Like you said, it's a hopeful book. I think it's a book that portrays the family dynamic, just like we open a family portrait, a family album. So most people don't know what my kids don't know what family albums are anymore, right? Because now we just have photo streams on our phones, right? Endless photos. We take 4,000 photos when before we would all really try to pose and take one picture, right? One click. And that would be the picture we remember. Now there's 1,000 pictures from that whatever, from that lunch, from that party, and we don't delete any of them. So the idea that we have these albums, we used to put those pictures in books and flip the pages through the books. And we would see people that we loved. We'd see people who were flawed. We'd see people whose lives ended up terrific. We'd see people whose lives ended up tragic. And Genesis is that same family album. And it reveals to us, without apology, terrible, hurtful, tragic decisions that were made by human beings in an effort to live their lives the best that they could. And so it doesn't shield us from the kind of human flaws that exist in family dynamics. And it ends, I think, I interpret as a misstep. The book is filled with missteps. It ends with a kind of misstep. The misstep leads into the promise of the book of Exodus.
Right.
I mean, if you're going to say to be continued somewhere, the book can't end with Joseph saying, remember to bring my bones up to Israel. And then the brothers say, oh, well, he just died. Let's bring his bones up to Israel. The brothers make this promise to him, this kind of eternal promise that no matter what happens, at some point his bones will be brought up to Israel. And the book ends before the promise can be fulfilled. But actually, the Torah ends before the promise can be fulfilled also. Because even though Moses brings Joseph's bones out of Egypt, it's actually the sixth book of the Bible. It's the book of Joshua, where Joseph's bones are actually brought back. They're returned to the land of Israel.
Right. There's a quality of irresolution at the end of the book.
That's exactly right.
Because there's a quality of irresolution to life. Because any particular day that you stop and say, all right, now I understand what my life has been, tomorrow changes the whole thing all over again. So there is that. You're exactly right. There is that quality of irresolution. But I would still argue that through all of it, it's quite remarkable. It shows us, you're exactly right. It shows us every possible human flaw. It shows us jealousy and violence, and it shows us hatred, and it shows us lust, and it shows every human flaw that there could be. And at the same time, it shows us loyalty, love, aspiration, a sense of hope. And it's not easy. Life in Genesis is not easy. And there's that wonderful scene when Jacob comes down to Egypt and Pharaoh asks him, how old are you, old man? And he says, I've lived 137 miserable years, and he's saying, no, you're Jacob, you're our forefather. But he's had a tough time. Of course it's hard. And yet at the very end, there's this sense that something great is coming of this family. Something powerful is coming. That's why this story, I believe it's a story of great hope. I still think that the first word of the book, Vayar Elohim ki tov, God sees the world and it's good, and it ends that way as well. There's goodness in this world. Don't give up. Don't surrender to the darkness. Don't surrender to despair. Don't surrender to any particular moment of defeat. Vayar Elohim ki tov, there is goodness that is still latent within this world that we've yet to find.
So it's a great sermon.
There's the sermon.
It's a great sermon.
Now you can sleep in Shabbos.
Yeah. Everybody gets the Shabbat off.
There you go.
So if we go back to literally the first word, not Vayar Elohim ki tov, we go to the word Bereshit.
Right.
All right. So we call it Sefer Bereshit because we call all of the 5 books of the Torah according to the first word of the book.
Right.
Right. If it wasn't Bereshit, or if we didn't call the book Genesis based on the Greek understanding of the word, what would be a more apt title? It's hard to do this, to rename a book of the Torah. But we'll definitely talk about this next year when the season will be about Shemot, and names is the actual translation of Shemot. This one, Genesis. What would you call this book?
See, it's a great question because it's the question Rashi asks at the beginning. So you all know that the great Torah commentator of the 11th century, Rabbi Shlomo ben Yitzchak, Rabbi Solomon Isaacson, who lived in France, writes the first comprehensive commentary to the Torah. And what he tries to do is to put into that commentary the corpus of the Midrashic, the rabbinic tradition, the later interpretive tradition, enough of it that every educated Jew needs to know. And Rashi's first comment on the Torah, he brings a midrash from the first century. He says, why does the Torah begin with Bereshit? Why doesn't it begin with the first mitzvah to the Jewish people, which is in Shemot, which is in Exodus? And then he goes and talks about, well, that's exactly the point. If the Torah had begun with the first mitzvah in Exodus, we would miss all of that good stuff in Genesis. But more than that, it would be a book of law. The Torah is meant to be a book of law, but not only a book of law. That law is rooted in narrative, and deeper than that, that law is rooted in core values. The word Breshit can mean Genesis, the beginning of stuff. I think it's better translated as foundations. This is the book of Yesodei HaTorah. That's what Maimonides called it, Yesodei, the foundations of Torah. These are the fundamental values, the way that we look at human beings, the way that we look at the world, the way that we look at good and evil, the way that we look at work in the world, at evil in the world, at gender in the world, all of the issues, all of the deep values that have to be at the foundation of faith in order for a religious culture to grow. So I would say Breshit is the right name of the book, but not Genesis, rather foundations, the foundations of our faith.
Great answer. Great answer. So I would go back to that same Rashi, that same explanation, that same introduction. Alan Dershowitz writes that all of the laws that are found from Exodus to Deuteronomy are derived from the common law of Genesis. So if you want to know why we have a law that a man should not marry two sisters, just read the story of Jacob and Rachel and Leah, and you'll know it.
Because it's insanity.
Because it's insanity. That's exactly. But the question, why do we get this law, and later on about a man not marrying two sisters? It's because we have this experience as a family early on. We tell these stories, and we decide that we want to codify that into law.
Right.
So I think foundations would be a great word. I also think that Breshit, commonalities. There are certain common tropes in all of our lives and all of our shared experiences and all of our families and all of our communities that we can shed light on based on these stories in Genesis.
Right. Yeah. I suppose if I choose another name, this is half facetious. It goes back to our previous conversation. I'd call it The Godfather.
Yeah.
Right? Because the character that is most salient in the whole book is God, who plays the role of a father, of a parent, who has such hopes and aspirations for his kids, and they keep disappointing him. And you get this sense of God saying like, "Oi, what's with you guys? What's wrong with you people? Why do you do this?" And it's God discovering all of the complexities of human personality, human family, human society, but never letting go of God's hope, never letting go of that aspiration for, who you could be, right. Who you could be. When my mother used to get really mad at my brothers and me, she'd stop yelling. And she would just sort of quietly say to us, "Boys, you're better than that." And that's really what God keeps saying in this book. So I call it The Godfather. How's that?
That's great. That's great. I mean, we could call it Torah Episode 1. Yeah. We could call it. There could be any number of ideas in terms of how to retitle it. But I think that this is a saga. This for sure is a saga of sorts.
Yes.
But the Torah ends up taking us through multiple generations, even moving forward. Moses lives through multiple generations.
Right.
And so we see the development from a couple. We see development from Adam and Eve through couples that have followed. Abraham and Sarah actually begin a family successfully, even with their own missteps. Isaac and Rebekah begin their family, even with their own nepotistic misjudgments about their own kids, and then Jacob and his myriad of wives and
crazy kids
and all kinds of it ensues through Joseph and Joseph's experiences in Egypt.
And I think the word development is the right word. If you ever see like medieval portraiture, medieval pictures are flat.
Right.
The characters are two-dimensional characters and they're flat. As the Renaissance began, you begin to see the creation of three-dimensional portraiture in European art. And I think something similar happens in the book of Genesis. When we first begin the book, the characters are relatively emotionally flat. Abraham is Abraham. As you get closer to the end of the book, starting to look at Jacob and his children, my favorite character in this is Judah. They change. The idea that a human being can change. Judah, I think, starts out as the most cynical of the brothers. He's the one that says, let's not kill the kid, let's sell him, which of course is a fate worse than death. And then he has this experience with Tamar. He loses 2 sons. Tamar shames him into providing a progeny. And at the end of the story, he's the one that stands in front of Joseph and says, take me. I can't go home and see my father cry. He grows a soul. Joseph grows a soul. You see characters opening up and changing in ways. So even the psychology of the book changes from the beginning to the end. By the end, there really is a deep conviction that human beings can develop. They can grow. They can change. They can grow souls. They can become deeper and better and loving. And that is a remarkable discovery in this book.
So I'm going to reinterpret Genesis now for all of us in these final moments of this last episode. And I'm going to relate it to a piece of art that a movie that I like to talk about, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, okay, by Walt Disney. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Mickey decides that he's going to use the sorcerer's hat to try to clean, he's however you want to understand it, he's the kid that's supposed to clean this giant space, and puts on the magic hat, and he divides the cleaning supplies into the broomsticks, into more broomsticks, into more broomsticks, into more broomsticks. The broomsticks take over. He can't control it anymore. Mm. We often don't think of God as the sorcerer's apprentice and the human experience as the broomsticks. Mm. Whatever was intended at the beginning of Genesis, whatever was intended, the question is, does it play out? Does it not play out? The rabbis ask the same question in the Talmud. Mm-hmm. Was it a good move to create humanity or not? The rabbis conclude, horrible move. Let's go daven mincha, right? This is just very disappointing. But the truth is that however this was intended, it's for us to clean it up. And Genesis holds out this profound statement that actually we have control over our own families. We have control over our own fate. We have control over our own destiny. Yeah. We can reconcile. We can say we're sorry. We can, and those aren't ideas that we should take for granted. Mm-hmm. Not every culture, religion, people understands that a person can come back to their parents, or parents can stand before their children and say, I messed up. I messed up and I'm sorry. And I hope you take me back in. Not every tradition holds out hope that brothers who have been long estranged come back and stand next to each other when they bury their father.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful way to put it.
And even though it's kind of this weird broomstick, these kids have spiraled out of control. They don't speak to each other. I think those are the most hopeful moments in Genesis.
Yeah. Right. I mean, one of the questions you ask as an exegetical question is, who wrote this and why? Right. You can imagine any number of moments of Jewish history when this book was either written, or if you want to be more traditional, the book was simply embraced, because we needed that lesson. We needed to remember that as things are, we can make them better. Right. We can embrace hope at this moment. So once, many years ago, Nina and I were visiting Rome on the way home from Israel. And we booked a tour of the Vatican, and we booked, you pay an extra few dollars, you get to go in early. Uh-huh. And it was a crazy quirk of things. They were doing construction in the place. And we were walking into the Vatican, and the construction people moved everyone in the crowd to one side. Nina and I were ahead of them. And we walked through a door, and we found ourselves alone in the Sistine Chapel. Me and Nina and God for about a minute before the rest of the world comes in. Have you ever been to the Sistine Chapel? Yes, it's crowded as heck. I mean, 1 million people there. There we were, the two of us, and we looked up, and there's God on the ceiling. That's a Genesis image, right? And I remember looking at this, and your first impression is, God, is he scary? This powerful image that Michelangelo painted. And we're standing there, and the room is silent, and it's just the two of us looking up. And then I looked carefully. I looked for another, I had 1 minute before the rest of the world showed up. And you look into the eyes of that character, and it's full of hope. It's so full of hope. This was Michelangelo's image of the ultimate reality of the universe. A God who's Adam, the man, is lying there languidly with his finger out. And God is forcing hope into the world at that moment. And I got tears in my eyes watching this just for that one moment. It was the most remarkable moment. That to me is Genesis.
Right.
That hope, a God who hopes, a God who is asking us to hope.
A creator God.
A creator
A builder.
God with love.
With love.
Out of love.
So this is the conclusion of the first season, and we end with
Chazak. We need chazak. We should be strong and do it again in 5 years.
Genesis brought me back in many ways.
Yeah.
Genesis called me back into being more proactively Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
Long before I was a rabbi, it called me to say, the place where you should be deriving wisdom, give the Torah a chance.
Moses wrote the book. You made the movie.
I made a movie. That's right. But I really appreciated it. I love talking about this book. I love talking about all of the different episodes, the narratives, the meanings, and I've loved talking about it with the clergy at VBS. And I don't know, out of the 30 episodes, 22 of them, I've loved 23, 24. I'm looking around, people shrugging. I've loved talking about with Rabbi Feinstein.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for embracing this new podcast medium. And we look forward to returning back to learning with you next year, maybe over the summer. We'll figure it out. But I don't know if it's too early to announce that our season 2 will most likely be Exodus?
Shmot.
That's right. Second book of the Torah. We'll move from the first book of the Torah to the second book of the Torah. So don't turn the page just yet.
We're coming.
Don't turn the page.
Wait for us.
Put the bookmark in, close your chumash, and wait for us. We'll come back in the fall.
Actually, when Talmud, at the end of the Masechta of Talmud, when you ended line of Talmud, what do you say? Hadarnallah. Go back over it and learn it again. So seriously, if you've been enjoying these podcasts, which Rabbi Lebovitz has graced us with, go back and read it again. Very few Jews actually sit down as you read the Bible, but it's actually worth doing. And Genesis, of all the books of the Bible, is the most readable. So sit down in a quiet place with a good cup of tea or scotch and read through the whole book and get a sense of the panoply, the whole panorama of the whole book. You'll find it quite remarkable. Thank you.
Thank you. And especially as Shavuot is coming up just around the corner, sit down with the Torah and appreciate it as our gift, as the eternal gift that God has given our people. And we look forward to delving into more Torah with you next time. Signing off season 1. It was a pleasure learning with all of you.
Chazak v'nitchazek.